Welcome to the Claire Alden podcast. In this series, The Narc Behind the Educator, I and fellow narcissism educators discuss and share our own personal journeys with the narcissist and narcissistic abuse in our own lives.
'Cause every time you talk it sound like blah, 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 blah. I'm just hearing blah.
Hi, Adriana. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey Claire, thanks so much for having me.
So, your mother was a narcissist.
Yeah.
What age did you realize that she was one?
So I was like 26-ish when I realized she was a narcissist. But
Okay.
I sort of went back into denial until 28-ish.
Okay. So, how did her behaviors manifest when you were growing up?
So it was a disaster, honestly, when I think back
Okay.
on it. So pretty much she did the classic like parental alienation kind of stuff. So basically
Right.
her and my dad had gotten divorced and
Okay.
I was pretty much like a pawn in that whole case. So I figured out eventually that like the only reason she had me was to sort of get back to my father and
Wow.
cause all the nonsense. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I was basically brainwashed into hating my father. So I was just like terrified of him all the time. She would yell all the time about like anything and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, like there were so many ways that it manifested, but like I thought it was just normal. Like I thought this was just how mothers are. We
Yeah.
also lived with my grandparents because my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother had a stroke. And so my mother decided to take it upon herself, not out of the goodness of her heart, but in order to bamboozle my uncle with like their inheritance and all that when my grandparents eventually died.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically ended up living with my grandparents. I kind of helped my mother caregive to my grandmother and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, if I ever wanted something, we supposedly couldn't afford it because my grandmother needed something, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, pretty much she put me down a lot. It wasn't really until I was like a teenager that things really got bad because that's basically when you get your personality and you start,
Mm,
being your own person kind of thing. So she really didn't like that. And
tell me a little bit more about that.
yeah, for sure.
Once
So
you
I
start to
mean,
get your personality.
yeah, she did not like it at all because
Mm,
narcissistic mothers, they want their children to be extensions of themselves. So she expected me to
yeah.
pretty much be like her mini me. And
Yeah.
I just remember her just talking shit about me to all of her friends who would listen. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
What
I
age did
remember I
this
was
start?
like 12-ish, but I remember there was a
Wow.
time
Okay.
when I was 13. Yeah, 13, it was really, really bad. And
Okay.
I would literally overhear her on the phone with one of her friends. I know exactly which friend it was. And she'd be like,
Okay.
"Oh, I'm having so many problems with Adriana. She's just like ruining my life, like all this kind of stuff." And
Oh,
like I would
wow.
just feel so guilty. Yeah.
Yeah. How was her relationship with her parents when you were living
Awful.
together?
It was awful. They would every night they would have yelling matches, the three of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I'm pretty sure like my grandmother was a narcissist as well. Like she was just
Right.
that shit herself. My grandfather, poor guy, like he just wanted to drink his espresso and have his cigarette in the morning, but like, they would just always yell at him for some reason or another. So it was just like constant conflict.
And how did this affect your relationships with people outside of the home? Friendships growing up?
Yeah, so I had so many narcissistic friends. Obviously, I had no
Okay.
idea at the time. I
Okay.
dated a lot of narcissists as well. And, like when people were genuinely nice to me, I didn't know if they were just being nice out of like pity or if they like
Mm,
actually liked me, stuff like that.
mm, okay. And how did they see your mother when you did have friends?
She was on her best behavior if I
Yeah.
ever had friends over. It didn't happen
Yeah.
too often that I would have people over, just
Okay.
because like I wasn't allowed or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was not allowed to do a lot of things.
Okay. Did she wear a mask outside of the home a lot? Was she very different
Absolutely.
inside and outside? Yeah.
Absolutely. She was like the nicest person ever outside of the house, unless,
Mm,
there was a way to get supply or like embarrass me or something. But for the
wow.
most part, she really played the role of like loving mother and all that kind of stuff. And behind closed doors, it was completely different story.
That must have been really confusing as a kid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What ways would she embarrass you?
Um, like just, making fun of what I was wearing. I remember one time like she got into a random conversation with some lady at Walmart about like I don't even know what it was about like kids fashion back in the day and how like everything I
Mm,
wanted was stupid and like they just had a field day like just talking shit about me. It was like a random stranger too, so it was just like crazy.
oh,
Yeah, or like, yelling at me in public. Like if it was my birthday, for example, like every birthday, she would make me cry.
okay.
And just like embarrassing me in front of my friends and stuff like that
Yeah. Why do you think narcissists ruin special occasions like that?
because it's not about them.
Yeah. Okay.
They have to make it about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say to yourself growing up? I mean, it's hard because you didn't know anything different, but looking
Mhm.
back, how did you internalize all of this behavior?
Oh, I thought I deserved it. I deserved everything that my
Really?
mom did to me and said
Yeah.
to me. I thought I was like the worst kid ever. I was
Okay.
like constantly striving to get her approval, and I never would,
Yeah.
obviously. And then I just kept thinking that like I was just such a horrible person.
Mm. Did you have any safe relatives that you could have a relationship with?
Not really, because
Wow.
basically, yeah, my mom alienated me from a lot of people. So I didn't have my dad's side of the family at all. And all the
Okay.
relatives on her side, like they didn't like her, but she played like the victim role and then she would sort of turn me
Mm.
against them as well. So I was very much isolated and I had no real frame of reference for what normal was. And I'm her only
Wow.
child as well. So like I didn't have any siblings or anyone to really talk to about it.
Yeah, that would have been incredibly difficult. Looking back, you said that you had a lot of narcissistic friendships growing up. What kind of age do you feel like you first started to make friends that had narcissistic traits?
Oh, like right away. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, children's debatable, right? If they're narcissists or not.
Yeah.
But I guess definitely like in high school, I did not have great friends. In elementary school, I
Mm,
didn't really have friends at all, because I
mhm,
was bullied a lot in school.
mm.
And I'm sure that like my mother really played a role in that, like, because she would embarrass me at school as well.
Okay.
And
In what
so, yeah,
ways?
like just like, coming to the school and like, making a scene, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember too many specifics because I blocked a lot of that out of my memory.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, like in high school, definitely I started like I didn't have too many friends in high school, honestly, but a lot of them like were not great friends either. There was a lot of like, like the mean girls, the catty girls, stuff like
Mm,
that. And then of course in like university and adulthood it was I definitely had some like decent friends that were normal.
okay.
And I still have those friends to this day, so I'm really
Okay.
grateful for
Great.
them. But
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of the friends were narcissists. Like even like my maid of honor at my wedding ended up being a narcissist.
Wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah. Because it's hard when you grow up with a narcissistic parent because those red flags are so familiar that you don't see them.
exactly. It just seems normal.
Yeah. And it's really common that with a narcissistic parent that you don't even realize that they're a narcissist or start to have that realization until you're well into your 20s or really
Mhm.
30s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no clue until like a breakup with a narcissist in my 20s.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, in terms of romantic relationships as a teenager, how did that go? And starting to build your independence from your mother.
Yeah. So as a teenager, like I chose terrible guys.
Yeah.
Because I was
Yeah.
made fun of a
Don't worry, I
lot
did
in
too.
school. Yeah. Yeah. I was like definitely made fun of a lot in school
Oh,
about like my
yeah.
appearance and stuff like that.
Mm.
So like I just thought I was like the ugliest thing ever. And so I guess
Wow.
like in high school I got decent looking. I don't know. But I
Hmm.
started getting attention from guys. I didn't really date anyone at my high school, but like there were like, online websites where like you could meet peers and stuff like that,
Mm.
which, you know, today it just seems like super sketchy that like that was the way to meet
Yeah.
people back then. This was like the early 2000s, but
Yeah.
I always went with friends to meet people. And so basically like any guy that would give me attention, like, I would think like, oh, okay, maybe this one is a decent boyfriend.
Mm.
Um, so those a lot of those ended up being like train wrecks type of stuff. And in
Mm.
hindsight, of course, too young to tell if a teenager's a narcissist, but would
Yeah.
not be surprised if those guys are now narcissists.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course in young adulthood, I only dated one guy who was not a narcissist.
Okay.
Then I had a whole pattern of dating narcissists like in adult relationships, and then
Yeah.
I figured it out and then found my now husband. So
Um,
I broke the pattern. It's possible to break that pattern.
yes, it is definitely. Was your mother threatened by you starting to have romantic relationships and having guys start to be interested in you as a teenager and a young adult?
Totally. As
Tell
like
me
a
about that.
teenager, I sort of had to like hide it from her because like she just
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to do anything.
Hmm.
But in young adulthood, like when, I started having like serious boyfriends and stuff like that, and like,
Mm.
having her meet them, like she would start getting worse with her like tactics. Like I just
Yeah.
remember like anytime I was in a relationship with a narcissist,
Mhm.
she would start acting up even more. And
Yeah.
I think I have a theory now that as I'm talking about this, that
Hmm.
she could probably sense that they were narcissists too, and
Okay.
she didn't want to compete for my attention. So she had to like try to
Mm.
outnarc them away.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah.
How did she respond generally because you lived with her until you were, was it in your 20s that you lived with
Yeah,
her?
I was like 20. I left in 2016. So I would have been like 28,
Okay.
27, 28.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's a long time.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So how did you start to break free and create an independent personality from her? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it was really difficult. I mean, I already had figured out that my personality was completely different from her at like a pretty
Yeah.
young age because like there was
Yeah.
just so many contradictions that didn't make sense. But of course, I
Okay.
gaslighted myself a lot.
Yeah.
In terms of breaking free, it was really, really hard for me to do because my mother
Yeah.
financially abused me as well. So I didn't
Okay.
really have any savings. I was in debt and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Because I don't
the
ever want you to
idea
be able to leave.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, she even charged me for rent and stuff like that too. Like the moment,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Like I didn't have my own bank account until I was like
Okay.
24 or something.
And you were
And that,
working and the money was going
yes.
into her account.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me more
Actually,
about
it was
that.
like 22-ish. Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, it was 22 when I got my secret bank account. So it was
Yeah.
like, second last year or last year of university, I was
Hmm.
bartending on the side and I was making
Yeah.
really good tips. And, historically, all of my money would go into our shared bank accounts. But, obviously she had full access to it and could see everything. So if I were to,
Mm.
buy
Wow.
a shirt for $20, she would scream at me. If I went to the mall and bought lunch with my friends, she would scream at me. So it
Wow.
was very
Why?
annoying because I was wasting money.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would she spend the money on?
Oh, anything like,
Yeah.
stuff for herself, trips, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so pretty much I got my bank account when I was like 22.
Hmm.
And because I had all these tips accumulated from my bartending job back then. And
Hmm.
it was a crazy amount of money at the time, like $600 or something, just cash. And I had been like hiding it in my closet. And then I realized, okay,
Wow.
maybe I should put this in a bank account, but it's not going to go in my mother's bank account
Yeah.
because, yeah, screw that. That's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
I realized, oh, I'm over the age of 18. So I basically just literally walked into the bank, brought my ID, and opened up my own account, didn't tell
Wow.
her.
Okay.
And yeah, I like had money saved for the first time in my
Yeah.
life. But eventually she found out about that because obviously the checks weren't going into her account anymore. And so
Mm.
she started to charge me rent. And
Wow. Okay.
yeah, she charged me like $800 of rent. And this was like the early 2010s, late 2000s.
Okay.
So you can imagine, like, rent's expensive in Toronto, but that was basically like above market rate back then. For,
Wow.
like I could have rented a room in like a house with like random people, which, sounds dangerous, but would have been a better option than living with my
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
So it was really like financially crippling for me. And I basically had been in so much debt from living with her and
Yeah.
paying her every month. She even would even like up until I was 27 and moved out, she literally would
Hmm.
take receipts from when she would go grocery shopping. And at month end, she would split them in the middle and bill me for half of like
Wow.
groceries. Yeah. Plus
Yeah.
rent, plus like auto, like my car stuff was like all in her name, plus like the heating bill, plus like just every bill you can possibly
Mm.
imagine. Even like the water heater that was like $12 a month, she would literally charge me $6 a month for it. So
Wow.
I was just like not able to save money at all. And I didn't know this
Yeah.
wasn't normal, right? Like I thought like,
Mm.
oh, my
Okay.
mom's doing me such a big favor, letting me live at her house. I'm saving
Wow.
money, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But really I was like funding her nonsense.
Because that was my
So
next question. What were you telling yourself during all of this? Yeah.
yeah, so
I thought it
I
was
at
normal.
first, yeah, at first I really thought it was normal. And then eventually I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm in my 20s, like past my mid 20s at this point. I'm still living at home. This is kind of pathetic, but like
Mm.
I have like negative amount of money in my bank account. Like this is
Yeah.
just crazy. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
figure out what to do or
Yeah.
how to make more money because like I had decent paying jobs, like salaried
Yeah.
jobs, like working in the corporate world, but
Yeah.
it was just not happening.
Mm.
So I decided to eventually take on more debt and move out.
So what happened then? How did
Yeah.
she
So,
respond to you moving out?
oh man. So which time? So I moved out twice. Um,
Okay.
the first time I only lasted like 2 weeks. And that
Oh.
actually put me into more debt. So I actually ended up
Oh
losing
wow.
personal rent. She ended up
Why
guilt
did it only
tripping me
last 2 weeks?
because she guilt tripped me.
Yeah. And tell me about
Yeah.
that. What did she do?
So yeah, so basically she used my dog against me. So my
Oh,
Yeah, my
okay.
angel puppy Chewy. He passed away last year, but he was
I'm
with me
sorry
throughout
about that.
everything. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was a special needs dog, so he was in a wheelchair,
Okay.
he was paralyzed, so
Oh,
and like yeah, he was just like the love of my life. And
yeah.
she used him against me a lot.
Okay.
So when I first moved, he started like I got a few noise complaints because he would bark throughout the day when I was at work.
Mm,
And so
okay.
that was nerve-wracking for sure. So I was talking to her about it because like, you're gonna talk to your mom about stuff. And so
Yeah.
then she ended up like, I don't even remember what specifically she said, but she basically like love bombed me and convinced me to move back into her house. She said,
Mhm.
oh, like don't worry, things are gonna be different this time. Like the dog needs a house. He can't live in a small little apartment, which would have
Mm.
been fine because he was paralyzed anyways. But you know, regardless,
Yeah.
it was just like she used the dog against me so
Yeah.
much. And,
Yeah.
like I just wanted what was best for Chewy. And
Mm.
so she basically like sort of bamboozled me. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to move back home. Called the
Mhm.
movers, moved back home, ended my lease early, lost, thousands of dollars in rent. And it just really sucked. The
Yeah.
second time that I moved out was 2016, and I was a lot more smart and strategic about it because in
Okay.
2012, I had no idea that she was a narcissist. I didn't know what a
Mm.
narcissist was. And so
Yeah.
in 2016, I knew exactly what a narcissist was. I had reached my limit. I was like, hey, that is it. I am done with this woman. Like, I cannot live here anymore. Enough is enough. And I didn't tell her that I was moving out until basically when I moved out. And
Okay.
so she did not like it at all. I had a few friends actually help me move like a table that I bought from the first time I moved out,
Hmm.
and like some other like big stuff as well because I didn't really do like the whole moving trucks thing. I kind of did it very secretive at first. Like I
Okay.
just had like some suitcases, loaded them into my car when she wasn't home, and like started setting up stuff at like the new place.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure it was like that same week or like the day of that I was like, oh, by the way, I got my own place or something. And like she was just not having it. And so when my friends were actually helping me move, they came over, she caused a scene. So, to
Okay.
get supply, she
Yeah.
grabbed my keychain, took her key off of it, and basically yelled at me in front of everyone that I'm not welcome back at her house unless I have a formal
Wow.
invitation from her. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was wild. It was absolutely wild. And yeah, like we just left.
Did that kind of solidify for your friends what was really going on and what she was really like?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so.
Mm.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Like my friends, like they didn't really say anything about it because like it was just
Okay.
such an uncomfortable thing. And
Yeah.
I was just like really focused on just like getting the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
But
When she love bombed you the first time, had there been a cycle where she would sort of love bomb you to manipulate you and reel you back in, or was that the first time that she kind of really laid it on with the love bombing?
that would have been like the most significant time that had like the worst consequences of me,
Yeah.
reacting to the love bombing and buying into it.
Yeah.
She definitely would love bomb me before, but it wasn't as obvious. Like it would have been more subtle, where
Mm.
like, like she would love bomb me a lot, like if she needed something, like if she needed help with her computer or something like that. Like
Okay.
she
Yeah.
would be super nice and, all that kind of stuff. But that situation would have been like, you know, a major, major love bomb.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to break away, and it can be such a relief when they do come back and love bomb you. It's actually
Mhm.
like relieving.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you've
totally.
had a couple of narcissistic relationships.
Hmm.
Tell
I
me a
sure
bit about
have.
that.
Where do I start? Um, I guess I'll start with the last one because I
Okay.
had no idea the ones previous to that were narcissists. So it was just like a
Mm,
very short-lived relationship. It was like a 3-monther, but the
mm,
most confusing one ever because the
okay.
love bombing, it was like a constant love bomb, like in
Yeah.
those first 3 months, and then it just like suddenly went to shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there were some red flags too. Like he ended up, there was one night where he was like crying because he was in debt, like thirty thousand
Hmm.
dollars or something crazy like
Oh, wow.
that. And it was like the first time he told me, and I was like, okay, wow. And this was like after he said he wanted to move in together. And I was like, okay, if you're in that much debt, like, how does this work? Like, it just doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. And then
Yeah.
I ended up being the bad guy for calling him out on that. And like, he was being
Okay.
vulnerable and sharing like this traumatic thing or whatever. Um, yeah. So pretty much, yeah, all of a sudden, like after all that love bombing and, wanting to marry me, wanting to move in together, wanting the white picket fence and 2.5 children and, the dream,
Mm,
um, he all of a sudden one day was no longer attracted to me
okay.
and
Yeah.
only saw me as a friend. So that was
Wow.
like, what? So I
Yeah.
started Googling. Yeah, that's when I
Okay.
started Googling. And then I sort of went down that rabbit hole and realized I had a little pattern of dating narcissists. But like the
Okay.
ones I had dated before this one, it was it wasn't as confusing because like the behavior was so embedded into me because of my
Mm,
upbringing that it was very easy for me to blame myself for, why the relationship broke down and all that kind of stuff. And so it never occurred to me in those previous relationships to do any
yeah.
Googling, especially because they lasted a bit longer, like, a year, 2 years ish, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Whereas this one was like 3 months, and I was just like, wow, like that was very confusing. And that's kind of what led me to Googling and then realizing everything.
It was a catalyst relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience. I also dated
Yeah.
someone who was like the most pathological person I'd ever dated. And it was it was a catalyst to everything that I'm doing now.
Yeah, there's always
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
catalyst.
Yeah, that's it. Leads you down the rabbit hole of narcissism and Googling
Yep.
things like, is my partner a psychopath?
Yep, for sure. Oh man, it's wild how our stories are like so many of our stories are so similar.
Yeah, they are. What was some of the bigger red flags in the other relationships looking back that now you can see that they're kind of clangers?
Um, let's see. I haven't thought about these clowns in a while, so let me rack my brain a little bit. Um, one of them was like we were like best friends before we started dating. So it was like one of
Okay.
those things where it's like I never could have imagined dating him. And it
Hmm.
was just like out of nowhere, like he had feelings for me and,
Hmm.
confessed and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I guess we can date,
Hmm.
whatever. So that would have been a massive red flag because of like the love bombing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like just the contradictions really, like, we had all the same movies as our favorite movies in common. We liked the
The
same music,
mirroring.
and then the mirroring for sure. And then he
Yeah.
literally told me one day that he was just humoring me when, it wasn't, we didn't have all that
Wow.
stuff in common anymore. And I was like, what are you talking
Wow.
about? Like when we first started dating, you said this, this, and this. It's like, I was just humoring you. And I'm like, what
Wow.
does that even mean? Like, what? Why would you do that? Like, why would you
Yeah.
lie? And then like, oh, you're making it into such a big deal and all that kind of stuff. So,
Hmm. Wow, that must have been
those red
painful.
flags. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. For sure.
What about like crazy gifts or like expensive jewelry or trips or
Oh
anything
man.
like
Yeah. So no trip. Well, actually, the one that I was just talking about, there were some trips.
Okay.
But like he that was just a whole shit show. It was like
Well,
his
just for a
yeah.
second with that guy, how
Yeah.
long were you guys involved before he just was like, "Oh, I was just humoring you"?
So we were dating for, I want to say, like close to 2 years. The first 6 months were
Yeah.
perfect. And then
Okay.
after that, it just like he went on a trip to
Yeah.
I think London or something. And then all of a sudden it was like he's thinking of moving to London. And he's
Yeah.
telling me, like, think about what that would mean. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, does that mean we're moving to London or we're having a long distance relationship? Like, I don't
Mm.
understand. And then he got mad at me for asking him those
Yeah.
clarifying questions. So that
Yeah.
would have been like the first kind of red flag sort of thing.
Wow. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
ask me for accountability or rational
Right?
answers.
Exactly. Like, how dare me?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I just had
No,
to get a
no.
clarification on that because that was
Yeah, for sure.
crazy.
Totally. Totally. It was just so wild. Like looking back, it's like, geez, like I wish I knew what I knew now, but hey, it
Yeah,
had to
like
play
you
out the
guys were
way
in
it
a
did.
full-on relationship and he says this. It's like,
Yeah. Like, yeah,
okay.
I'm moving across the ocean. Like, oh, okay,
Mm,
cool. Like, what?
yeah,
And it was like a
yeah,
Friday night. I was out with my friends. And so he just wanted to ruin my time with my friends, of course, because he had
yeah.
to make it about himself and he couldn't be there to
Mm,
ruin it for me. So he
mm,
had to do it from, thousands of kilometers away.
yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like gifts and stuff like that, there was one guy that and this like it actually freaked me out to the point where I never saw him again. We went
Okay.
on one date. Yeah, we went on one date. I didn't even think it was a date because like,
Yeah.
he did pay and all that, but like he didn't like try to make a move on me or anything like that.
Hmm.
And then like the next week or something, like we didn't have plans to go on another date or something. But the following week he was going on a trip like down south for like Christmas vacation or whatever, and
Hmm.
he wanted to drop off a gift for Christmas for me. So I was like, okay, cool. So he like came to my house, dropped it off, left, like just very like
This is after one date.
after one date. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like already freaked
Wow.
out that like,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, I was like not like looking for a relationship or anything like that at that time either.
Mm,
It didn't even feel like a date, to be totally honest. But so I opened the gift after he left because like he literally like, dropped it off and ran away. Like it
wow.
wasn't like he didn't come in, like there was no conversation, like he was like literally on
Yeah.
his way to the airport.
Yeah.
So I opened it and it was a diamond heart-shaped necklace.
Wow.
What?
Was it
Yeah.
expensive?
Yeah, it was diamonds. So
Oh
like,
my gosh.
it was like
Wow.
real diamonds, like from an actual diamond store. So I was like bamboozled and like it was in a heart shape. So I was like, okay,
Oh
like
my
that's
God.
yeah, like that's a little forward. That's a little weird. And so when he got back, like he I don't remember who messaged who, but like we had a
Mm,
conversation and I said like I have to give this back to you because like this is
mm.
this is weird. Like I
Too
can't
much.
accept like yeah, like I cannot accept like such an expensive gift. Like this is too
Yeah.
much. He said like
Yeah.
no, don't worry about it. Keep it. Like it's a gift. People
Okay.
don't give gifts because they want something from somebody else. Like, just keep
Actually,
it. I was like,
narcissists
all
do.
right. Exactly, yeah. So I'm pretty sure that was probably him like love bombing me, and I'm sure there would have been strings attached if like anything had
Yeah.
continued.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just stopped talking to him after that. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was like the
Yeah.
one bullet that I knew to dodge. Because like the love bombing wasn't really to that extent with like the other guys. Like it was more like,
Mm,
like we would go on a lot of fun dates at first, and then all of a sudden, like they're broke because they spent so much money on me on all the fun dates we had and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So a lot of those ones where like they would say that they're broke because they spent all their money on you, were they hedging for you to pick up the tab?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There was one guy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's you're bringing back the memories. This is hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm just happy I can laugh about it now. There
Right.
was one guy who, yeah, yeah, like the first like couple of dates, like he paid.
Hmm.
And that like, and I was never expecting him to pay for everything. Like I would always like offer to pay every single time.
Mm,
And he would always say, no, no, it's my treat. I'm taking you on a date, all that kind of stuff. So
okay.
I'm like, okay, cool. Like, whatever. I'll stop arguing. It's been 5 minutes of me trying to argue with you.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and then all of a sudden, he started like, it was very like tit for tat. So he would pay one time, I would pay the next time. And like,
Hmm.
he was like, he really like remembered the schedule. And he even took it to the point of like driving, like who's going to drive. And if it was my
Wow.
turn to drive, yeah, even if like I wasn't feeling well or I was working at that bartending job, it was like in a
Yeah.
different city and he
Yeah.
lived in a different city like further north from Toronto, and like where I was working was like west of Toronto, so like it was like
Mm,
a solid like 45 minute to 1 hour drive, so I would be
hmm.
exhausted from working until like 2 in the morning. And then he
Yeah.
would still expect me to go to his place. And it
Wow.
didn't matter how tired I was or how exhausted I was. If it was my turn to drive, it was my turn to drive.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you think when this
I
was
thought it was
happening?
normal. I thought it was normal
Yeah.
because I was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, well, to be fair, he did drive last time. So I guess I have to drive this time.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really that like entitlement, that complete lack of empathy, he doesn't care how late it is that you've been working. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is so unattractive looking back, right?
Oh, God.
Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, yeah. Now I'm like, how? Like, I wish
yeah.
I knew what I like. I just feel so much empathy for like my younger self that like didn't know better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Me too. So many people get into this place of like they're angry at themselves or they feel embarrassed or, they
Yeah.
hate themselves for what they feel like they allowed in a relationship. And it's so
Oh,
important to look back at that part of you and just see that you were looking for love in the wrong place
exactly.
and have
Exactly. And
compassion.
yeah. And I absolutely was angry at myself too, because,
Yeah.
there's so much gaslighting out there that it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I should have known, right? Because
Mm,
according to the
victim
narcissist, I should have known
blaming.
everything, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a
Yeah.
lot of victim blaming and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But then, you see like when all of your relationships go to shit, who's the common denominator? Right. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like it's obviously like something's wrong with me. So I would
Yeah.
blame myself. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until like I really did my inner work and my healing where I started to actually have empathy for my younger self.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I do as well. I
Yeah.
look back at myself and I just want to give myself a hug.
Yeah. Amazing. Me too. It's just like, wow, you poor thing, Like when you go
Yeah.
from that place of like, I'm so stupid to, oh my gosh, poor me. Like
Yeah.
not in a pity party kind of way, but in a, oh my gosh, like that
Yeah.
pure, uninformed, like naive
Yeah.
version of myself.
Yeah. 100%. So how
Yeah.
did you get into coaching?
Oh man, so that's a long story.
All right, let's start.
So I will I will try to cold notes it as much as I can. So chronic pain is what led me to coaching, which
Okay, tell me about.
I know that sounds very random. So
Mm,
pretty much in 2015, I got my wisdom teeth taken out, and it was
hmm.
just a slippery slope downhill from there. So I
Okay.
ended up with TMJ dysfunction. So like the joint that connects your upper skull to your jaw was just like all out of
Hmm.
whack. I had migraines, neck pain, upper back pain, all that kind of stuff. I was in
Wow.
physiotherapy. Yeah, like it was just a whole shit show. My
Yeah.
jaw wouldn't open in a straight line. It would open in like a zigzag pattern. Like it was just,
Oh.
there was a lot going on, like physically
Yeah.
for me. And then things just got progressively worse. So by 2017, I had carpal tunnel and a
Wow.
surgery. Yeah, I had carpal
Okay.
tunnel release surgery when I was like 28, 29 years old. Like it was
Wow.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then things just kept getting progressively worse. So,
Hmm.
if I got the pain in one part of my body, I'd have pain in another part of my body. So
Mm.
by the time it was 2018, I had, you know, all the stuff I just listed, carpal tunnel, TMJ, migraines, all that kind of stuff. Then I got like runner's knee, tendonitis, tennis elbow. I don't play tennis. I don't
Wow.
run. So random.
Mm. Yeah, that's
I had
crazy.
all this weird ergonomic equipment at work, just like to
Mm.
like make sure like the posture was all good. So like I wouldn't have a
Mm.
flare up, but I still would have flare ups.
Wow.
And then yeah. And then by 2018, I started doing this treatment on my jaw to basically
Hmm.
realign my skull to hopefully maybe not have any more migraines. It wasn't even guaranteed, but I was just like so
Wow.
desperate for pain relief that I was like, okay, like let me try this. And you name it, I tried it. I did like nerve block injections. I did like Botox for migraines. I did like, physiotherapy, acupuncture, chiropractor, like you name it. I tried it, medical
Wow.
marijuana, all the things. I tried everything. And like painkillers, I had to stop taking at one point because I started getting ulcers. Like there was just a lot going
Mm.
on pain wise for
Yeah.
me. Yeah. And so then in 2018, October, which I will just never forget this, I had like this splint therapy thing that I was doing in my mouth for like the jaw treatment, and I had just started it. Like I was only a couple of months into it, and I had
Hmm.
braces for the second time in my life because you just want to have braces when you're 30.
Yeah.
It was,
I
you
had
know,
braces really late as well. It's the worst.
Oh, yeah, I had them when I was like 10, from 10 to 12, and
Wow.
like my teeth were perfect, like everything was great, but then this whole TMJ thing happened. So
Oh, yeah.
braces and like this
A
jaw
second time.
realigning.
Oh my
Yeah, like I
gosh.
was
Yeah.
not thrilled about it whatsoever.
Hmm.
So I definitely empathize with braces later in life. It's the worst.
Hmm.
And I got shingles in my mouth.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. At the ripe
Do
old
you have
age of
support
30.
during all of this?
I was in therapy, but my therapist was pretty
Okay.
useless. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Unfortunately, a lot of them are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the sad truth, honestly.
Yeah.
And
So what
yeah,
happened?
so I had shingles in my mouth,
Hmm.
and it's I'm sure shingles is extremely painful, and
Yeah.
shingles is something for seniors to worry about. Like you can't even get the shingles
Mm.
vaccine until you're
Mm.
50.
Yeah.
So yeah, and this was the second time in my life getting shingles. I actually had shingles one time when I was like 23 in 2011.
Wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was crazy. So basically, but the shingles in 2011 was like on my back. So it was
Okay.
horrible. It was like the
Yeah.
worst, but like in my mouth was absolutely like next level hell. Like it
I
was
can
it was
imagine.
hell. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You
It was
need your mouth for a lot
awful.
of things.
Yes. Absolutely. Like
Mhm.
you don't know how much you need your mouth until you get
Yeah.
TMJ in your
Oh
mouth.
my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I ended up so I like sort of paused with like the jaw treatment. Like I didn't,
Hmm.
do any new braces, wires, or anything like that because I had
Hmm.
just changed the wire and then I erupted into shingles.
Mm.
And yeah, it was crazy. It was the worst pain I ever had in my life. Like I was
Wow.
like in tears. Like it was
Mm.
horrifying. I couldn't have painkillers. I couldn't vape my medical marijuana because it was in my mouth. The
Mm.
like the shingles rash itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually, like, so I, went on the antivirals and all that kind of stuff, but like the nerve pain doesn't go away. So
Mm.
I ended up with something that's called trigeminal neuralgia. And so it was my trigeminal nerve that was affected by the shingles. And they
Mm.
nickname it the suicide disease because that is how
Wow.
painful it is. So I was
Wow.
30. Yeah. And I literally told my husband straight up, like, I'm 30. I'm already in this much pain. I am
Mm.
terrified of aging at
Yeah.
this point. Like, I don't know what 40 is going to look like if it's already this bad and like I can't
Yeah.
take it at 30.
Yeah.
So you might be calling yourself a widower in like 10 years, just
Mm.
FYI.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'm going to do my best to make it to 40. Like, that's literally what I
Mm.
told him.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was just in so much pain. I wanted to die. Like I was like
Hmm.
dying in pain. Like nothing was really touching my pain. And January of 2019 is when everything changed. And I stumbled upon something called the mind body connection. And
Okay.
so this is the work of Dr. John Sarno. And
Hmm.
it's basically the theory that any physical chronic pain that you have that has persisted for longer than 6 months, it's no
Hmm.
longer about the original injury anymore. It is about repressed emotions from childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was offended by
Yeah.
this, of course, at first. I
Oh,
was like,
okay.
that's bullshit. I don't believe it. Like, my pain's not all in my head. And it's not that the
Yeah.
pain was all in my head, it was physical,
No,
but
it's
it
real.
was exactly, it's real. The pain is
Mm,
100% real. It's
mm.
just, it comes from the brain. Like, the brain creates those pain signals because
Yeah.
you have this accumulation of all these repressed emotions that you had to push
Mm,
down to survive your childhood. And it's not like you
mm.
become an adult and your brain is like, okay, let's release those emotions because we're 18 plus now. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. You still
Yeah.
continue, you continue repressing those emotions throughout your adulthood. And so after 24 hours of being pissed off that, I bought this app for, the mind body connection and to work through it. Like I
Okay.
literally thought it was just going to hypnotize me into believing I didn't have pain or something like that. I didn't look
Okay.
into it or anything like that. So of course, like, I had like that buyer's remorse, but then I was still obviously
Mm,
in pain 24 hours later. So I was like, all right, it's not like I'm getting a refund on this. So humor
hmm.
me app. Let's try it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Within 4 months, I was pain free.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's
That's
how I
incredible.
became a coach. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I
So
started
we,
off as a pain coach.
a
And
pain coach. Yeah, that was
yeah,
going to be my
yeah,
question.
exactly. So
Wow.
I was like a mind body connection coach and
That's amazing.
eventually started talking about like my upbringing, being raised by a narcissist, how that caused me to
Okay.
repress those emotions. And then I realized narcissism is an epidemic. And so here we are.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a coach to answer that
That's
question.
amazing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was wild.
Yeah. So you started talking about your childhood growing up because you were talking about the repressed emotions. And then that kind of transitioned into full time talking about narcissism and helping people recover from narcissistic abuse.
Totally.
Amazing. Wow. And you're fully pain free.
Yeah, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Like I get flare ups every now and again, of course. And, I
Yeah.
get headaches every now and then when I have a long day. But, I just
Mm.
like have those tools now to release whatever emotions are there. And yeah, haven't had chronic pain
Wow.
in 4.5 years now,
That's
almost five.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to the adult child of a narcissist who is realizing that their parent is a narcissist?
They know what they're doing. They knew what they were doing the entire time. Don't blame
Mm,
yourself. Like,
yeah.
do not blame yourself.
Mm. What are your views on no contact?
I support it 100%. I understand it's not possible for everyone, right? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes there's, legal stuff that you have to take into
Yeah.
consideration and,
Hmm.
maybe emotionally detached, low contact is the only option and that's okay. So I'm not
Mm,
shitting on anyone who's not full no contact. Like
hmm.
I was a mixture of low and no contact with my narcissistic mother up until she
Mm,
passed away. So,
okay.
it is what it is. Like whatever your situation is, it's fine. But you have to really understand the dynamics and
Mm,
understand what to look out for if you are going to stay in contact. But if you are able to go full no contact, and you've got all of your ducks in a row, you've got all of your important documents. There's nothing that you would possibly have to go back to your parents for, like, your
mm,
birth certificate or like some random document, like you've got all your stuff together
hmm.
and you're able to do it,
Mm,
spread those wings and fly and never look back.
yeah. What about managing the guilt?
Yeah, so that's where the emotional work comes into play because that guilt
Yeah.
is going to eat you alive. And
Mm,
you have to understand that it is decades worth of repressed guilt because
mm,
they installed the guilt button in you from childhood.
yeah.
Like as soon as you were
Yeah.
impressionable, like they made you feel guilty about everything. And so
Mm.
you're not going to be able to just let go of the guilt because you logically understand that you don't
Yeah.
have anything to feel guilty for. You're still going to
Yeah.
feel guilty,
Yeah.
right? So processing that guilt is the most
Yeah.
important thing you can do because there's a difference between acting on your guilt and feeling your guilt. And the thing with
Mm.
emotions that no one teaches us is that you have to actually feel your feelings, right? Because
Yes.
we've been
Yep.
repressing them forever, you know?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you're not feeling those feelings, like you end up with chronic pain or, other
Mm.
mind body manifestations of it. And,
Mm-hmm.
you can act on the guilt, right? Like, so let's say you decide to go no contact with your narcissistic mother because you realize like she's only going to like hold me back in life. And you know this logically. And then you feel guilty. If you act on that guilt, you will probably end up answering her call when she calls you because she's guilt tripping
Mm.
you. And then
Yeah.
you end up increasing your contact with her because at least now she's happy, but now you're full of resentment,
Mm. Yeah.
right? And
What's
that
the
that pattern's
trade-off?
going to continue. Exactly. It's not
Yeah.
worth it. And
Yeah.
so
Betraying
feeling your
yourself.
guilt, exactly. So feeling your guilt, there's a huge difference where, you recognize like, okay, I feel guilty right now. Let me explore this feeling, which sounds very intimidating
Mm.
because like
Yeah.
who wants to
No
do
one
that?
wants to feel
Nobody
that.
wants to. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the thing you have to understand is that when you feel guilty or any unpleasant emotion, the first thing you want to do is stop feeling that emotion. So that's why it's so
Yeah.
easy to act on it and, break
Mm.
that no contact or,
Mm.
give in to the narcissist's demands. Whereas feeling it, and that actually prolongs the process, right?
Yep.
Whereas feeling it, the thing with emotions is that they only take 90 seconds to process. But the trick is
Mm.
you have to actually allow it in and let it be there
Mm.
and like fully feel that feeling and listen to what it's saying to you. And so if you
Yep.
actually take that time, right, when you're feeling guilty, like stop, drop, and journal. That's what I tell all my
Mm.
clients to do, right? Like do not make
I love
any
that.
decisions. Yeah, don't make any decisions when you're in like any sort of emotional state. Like just journal it
Yeah.
out, be honest with yourself. Even if you're like what you're
Mm.
journaling is like, I am the biggest piece of shit for disappointing my mother because now she feels
Mm.
bad. Because the thing with guilt is that like you feel guilty because you believe that you did something bad. So when you start exploring
Yeah.
it, you're going to bridge that gap between logic and emotion by actually
Mm.
allowing yourself to feel how you feel. And within
Yeah.
90 seconds, if you're accepting it, that emotion will start to dissipate. It won't be as intense. And then that's going to
Mm.
create space for clarity for you to
Mm.
realize, like, oh, okay, no, I don't have anything to feel guilty about at all. This was all like conditioned guilt. This was all
Yeah.
projected guilt because my
Mm.
narcissistic parents should be feeling guilty for what they've done to me my entire life. But instead,
Yeah.
you're carrying that burden and you're not equipped to deal with it because your
Mm.
narcissistic parents don't want you to deal with your emotions.
Mm.
They want you to be bamboozled.
Yeah. 100%. That's really good advice. I love that.
Thank you.
Stop, drop, and journal.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So, Adriana, where can people find you? What are your social media handles and your
Yeah, so
website?
yeah, you can find me. My website is
I
letsgetyourshiftogether.com.
love that.
That's shift with an F,
Yeah.
all one word. And my Instagram handle and TikTok and Threads, if anyone still uses that, I barely do.
Okay.
It's all Let's Get Your Shift Together. I think I have a Facebook page, a YouTube channel. You can find
Yeah.
me at Let's Get Your Shift Together, but you have a better chance of reaching me on Instagram. That's like the main platform I use.
Okay. Awesome. So let's get your shift together where you can sort out your relationship, was it that you said earlier?
Relationship, yes.
Yep, which is what it is with a narcissist.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much for having me.